down to the present a little bit, and then I'd be remiss if I didn't use some of our time on your personal purchase of the Washington Post.
Yeah.
So you buy the Washington Post a few years ago. Is it going the way you thought it would go?
Much better, much faster. So the Post is profitable today. So I bought the Post in 2013. The Post was still a fantastic institution at that time, but it was in great financial difficulty. It's a fixed cost business, as almost all publishing is, and their revenues over about 6 years, from sort of 2007, 2008 to 2013, had been cut in half from $1 billion a year to $500 million a year. And that, in a fixed cost business, puts a tremendous amount of pressure on the business. They had needed to reduce the size of the newsroom, lay off reporters, and it was very difficult. And Don Graham, whose family had owned the paper for a long period of time, he contacted me through an intermediary, actually. We'd known each other probably for almost 20 years, actually. And I was very surprised, but he said that he was interested in selling the paper. And he wanted to, I said, look, I'm not the right buyer, Don, because I don't know anything about the newspaper business. And he said, we don't need any of that. We've got lots of people who understand the newspaper business. We need somebody who understands the internet better. And this was a great act of love of Don's, because the paper had been their family for a long time, and he cared more about the paper than he cared about his ownership of it. And if any of you know him, he's an incredible gentleman, just a wonderful guy. And so over several conversations, he finally convinced me that I could help. And then I had to convince myself of a couple of things. One was, did I really believe it was an important institution? And that for me was a very quick gate to get through. I felt very powerfully that it was an important institution. I do believe that democracy dies in darkness. I think that the paper resides in Washington, D.C., the capital city of the United States of America, the most powerful country in the world, needs a paper like the Washington Post. So it was easy to decide it's an important institution. I would not have bought and tried to help turn around a financially upside down, salty snack food company. I just have better things to do. So that's why for me it was so important that it be, now I might buy a really well-run, healthy salt food snack company, but that would just be an investment. And so and then the second gate I had to go through after that was, I really wanted to convince myself that it wasn't hopeless. Because if it had been hopeless, also I wouldn't want to get involved. But I didn't think it was, and it has turned out to work very, very well. We did one very simple thing, really, which is we switched from, it's been a lot of work, and I don't mean to make it sound simple. The team has done an amazing amount of work. And we have a great editor in Marty Barron, and a great publisher in Fred Ryan, and a great technical leader in Shai Lesh. I mean, we've got a killer team at the Post. But the big kind of strategic change at the Post was flipping it from being a fantastic local, regional newspaper to being a fantastic national, global newspaper. And the reason we did that is very simple. The internet took away so many gifts from newspapers. Mostly they're kind of local ad monopolies and so on. Like, the internet just dissolved all of the gifts that newspapers had. But the one gift that it brought to the table for newspapers is almost free global distribution, because you can do it digitally. And so we refocused on that, and we had to switch from making a relatively large amount of money per reader on a relatively small number of readers to a small amount of money per reader on a much larger number of readers, and that's what we've done. And
so in our time remaining, I have a couple real quick ones.
Yeah.
Who do you emulate?
What kind of role model?
Yeah, who do you look at?
Oh, a bunch of people. I have been a Warren Buffett fan. In the business realm, I've been a Warren Buffett fan since my early 20s. I read the things he writes. So he's a very big fan. I think kind of CEOs today out there that I like, again, in the business realm. Jamie Dimon, I think there are a couple of CEOs that I think if I were a big shareholder in JP Morgan Chase, I would just show up every Monday morning with like pastries and coffee for Jamie, and I would be like, so you happy? You good? Because I think he's a terrific executive in a very complicated company. Same thing, Bob Iger at Disney, I think is a superb executive. So probably bring him pastries. So there are a lot of role models.
Healthy pastries.
Well, yeah, I guess I hadn't thought about that. That's right. Yeah. And then outside of that, I've had lots of role models throughout my life. Yeah, some of my teachers at River Oaks Elementary School that you mentioned. I had my parents, who I talked about a little earlier. I didn't talk too much about my grandfather, but he was a gigantic influence in my life. I had the great good fortune, because my mom was so young, my grandparents would take me every summer, starting at age 4, every summer, kind of to give her a break, really, for the whole summer. So I'd be with my grandparents, and on their ranch in Cotulla, Texas, which is halfway between San Antonio and Laredo. We lived in Houston, and so we would make the 5-hour drive out to Cotulla. They'd drop me off, spend a couple of days there, then they'd go back to Houston. I'd spend the summer. And I went every day to the ranch with my grandfather to help. Now, a 4-year-old boy on a ranch in South Texas is not a lot of help. But I didn't know that. I thought I was helping, and then by the time I was 16, I actually was helping. So I have, I can suture up a prolapsed cow. I can fix windmills. My grandfather was so resourceful, and that he made his own veterinary needles. He would take a little piece of wire and pound it flat with like a oxyacetylene torch, and then drill a little hole through it, and then we did all of our own veterinary work. Some of the cattle even survived, and so we had great fun out there. We built barns and welded things, and he bought a D6 Caterpillar bulldozer used. It was like 1955 model year for $5,000. It was completely broken. The gears were stripped. And then we spent, a whole summer repairing that. And the first thing we had to do to repair it was build a crane to take the gears out of the transmission. And so, what I learned from watching him was just how resourceful he was. He didn't ever call a repairman. He figured it out. And I do think that that's one of the things that, super lucky for me to grow up in that environment where you got to see resourcefulness in action. So my grandfather, giant role model for me.
Well, Jeff, you're an American icon, and these stories really reflect how grounded you are. And starting a company from the time where you were doing it yourself to where you are today, and to maintain that touch that you have at the same time that you have this vision, is really what leadership is all about. The Bush Center, we focus on developing and recognizing leadership, and that's what we're doing this week. Our time is up, and I do want to thank you. I also